Not so long ago, the release of a big game from a well-known studio was something incredible. We were waiting for it, we wanted to play it, but most importantly, we were sure that the next AAA game would be really good. But somehow, unnoticed, it all remained in the past. Nowadays, the budgets and development time of AAA projects have increased several times, but for some reason, the quality of these games is only decreasing. But why do most big projects fail so often lately? And why do so many gamers claim that modern AAA games are garbage? Before the state of the gaming industry became as bad as it is now, large publishers and their studios reached an ideal state for their business. They were able to secure their market position, a fairly stable profit margin, and protect numerous intellectual property. They became the main predators of the industry. However, the problem began when these large companies stopped competing with each other. Instead, they decided to simply claim market territories, like rulers trying to protect their tiny pieces of land on an island. We call these territories video game genres. Have you ever noticed that some publishers only release a small number of games within certain genres? At first, you might think that developers are just releasing what they know, but the real problem is that when market presence begins to be fragmented, the need for innovation also decreases. In the early 90s, alongside the first Battlefield, DICE released Racing and Shrek, while Activision, together with Call of Duty, created strategies and games based on Madagascar and Ice Age cartoons. However, the publishers realized quite quickly that it was much more profitable and safer to just occupy one niche and try to dominate it. So AAA companies grew and grew, unrestrained by the conflict of competition. But at the time, unbeknownst to anyone, they began to stagnate. AAA games usually have large teams, expensive marketing campaigns, and huge amounts of funding. The term was borrowed from the credit industry and applied to games when obese corporate bigwigs realized that video games were no joke, but a business that could make more money than Hollywood. For the big publishers, AAA means this is the safest investment you can make to make a profit. This is no longer the case. Today, AAA mostly indicates the aspirations and cost of the game, not how safe the investment is. From the 80s to the 2000s, there weren't many real commercial failures in games. Most of the failures were hardware related, bad consoles and bad business decisions. But since the 2010s, game budgets have grown exponentially, and we've seen massive failures. And in the last 7 years, it seems that many beloved franchises have released what fans consider to be the worst parts. One of the biggest factors in the decline of AAA games is that they have become too big. For comparison, the good old World of Warcraft was created by a team of 40 people. A team of 100 developers worked on Half-Life 2, and now, more than 9,000 people were involved in the development of the shitty Diablo 4. Approximately the same number of people in Activision's office are now deciding what the next Call of Duty cringe skins will be. Let us recall Starfield, which was developed for 7 years. The budget of this project was about $200 million. Yes, we have 1,700 planets to explore, but wasn't it better to just get 100 that were actually good? AAA games have exploded in size, scale, and cost to an unprecedented level. On the one hand, a large team has the potential to create something truly incredible, to realize their greatest ambitions. But this depends on having a coherent vision among many people, as well as the budget and resources to realize it. However, the more ambitious a project is, the more money is invested in it, and the more risky it becomes. Let's recall Concord, which was supposed to become Sony's new flagship in the hero shooter genre. Firewalk Studios joined PlayStation in 2023, and Concord was their debut project. According to the preliminary estimates, Concord's budget reached $400 million, making it one of the most expensive games in history. The development itself lasted about 8 years. And this sounds strange, at least since even the largest projects like GTA or Call of Duty operate with similar budgets and a much wider target audience. But despite many years of development and significant investments, in the first week of the game's release, it became clear to everyone that Sony had just fucked up almost $500 million. The peak of simultaneous players on Steam was about 700 people, and less than 2 weeks after the release, Sony announced the closure of the servers. And Concord became the first and last release from Firewalk Studios. But how could such a situation happen to a company as experienced and large as Sony? Why was Concord, this random debut game from unknown developers, hyped up with such an atypical huge budget and high expectations? Well, this situation was not accidental, or just a bad strategic decision by Sony, and now you will understand why. COVID-19 has changed a lot of things. People who were able to survive bought a hell of a lot of video games during this time, and some game companies decided to adjust their business. They saw this as an opportunity to significantly increase investments, expand project production, and hire more employees. But of course, the boom in video game sales caused by the pandemic did not last too long. And now we are seeing its consequences. More than 20,000 layoffs in the next 2 years after the pandemic. More than 30 studios closed, and with it dozens of projects that were in development. The last 2 years have been pretty bad for game developers. Perhaps during the pandemic, big publishers hoped that COVID would be around for a long time, but overloading teams with employees and billions of dollars is not some kind of magic recipe for success. In fact, it has put studios in a much more difficult and stressful position, because if a game doesn't sell well, it's the developers who are to blame, not shareholders who can't think strategically. Blockbuster development costs are out of control. According to a report by the British Competition Authority, one major studio reported that it costed $660 million to develop a major franchise, while marketing cost almost $550 million, meaning that total budgets for AAA games can reach almost $1 billion and even exceed this huge figure. So yes, Suicide Squad, which is played by 130 people, probably has an inflated budget. It seems that every next big budget game is a lottery. Of course, companies want to reduce and avoid all possible risks, so again, they rely on already popular franchises and stick to what most players are familiar with, what the audience is used to. On the one hand, it sounds safe, but is it really so? To make a game worth hundreds of millions of dollars safe and potentially attractive to a large audience, studios have to simplify and dumb down a lot of things. They cannot take risks or experiment. They have to stick to what has proven to be effective. That's a huge reason why indie games like Helldivers 2 or Lethal Company are much better at innovating on a popular formula or giving us something completely new. This conditional safety has led us to the fact that some Call of Duty or Battlefield or any other popular franchises do not change at all from year to year. But this is not cool. Gamers like to be surprised. Let's see what developers have been surprising us with over the past couple of years. Nothing. I'm such an old fart that I remember the PS3 era and even the PS2 era when AAA games represented a certain level of quality in terms of technical achievements as well as gameplay. You got a polished product that had a certain level of content. Now we can't say that anymore, and I would even say that most AAA games are not even worth it, especially at the release stage when there are indie games that are much more enjoyable. And here we can take a look at a few specific reasons why. And the first one is an unnecessary open world. So today, AAA means a huge open world. This is done so that game publishers can justify the technical progress and content of the game, which deserves a price of $60 to $70. However, when a game has an overwhelming open world, it can do more harm than good, especially when the open world adds nothing to the gameplay itself. If this huge map doesn't help with the gameplay cycle, not only increases the distances you need to travel to get from point A to point B, then it's just a hindrance, not an advantage. There are games that use the open world to their advantage, such as Metal Gear Solid 5 or Skyrim. And then there are worlds, like the latest Ubisoft games, that seem empty and have rather stupid NPCs. Instead of having a world that you can explore, you're stuck with a bunch of quests and missions that have repetitive and boring formats. They will simply be multiplied to increase the hours to complete to justify the high prices of these games. But this is not the only thing that leads to their unjustified pricing. Technological advances in graphics and gameplay often lead to higher prices. With that in mind, when you play a game like Stray that costs $30, is it half as much fun as playing the new Call of Duty for $70? I would say no. We live in a time when it is getting easier and easier to create video games. I see games like Project Wingman, developed by just a few people, giving franchises like Ace Combat a run for their money. So, aside from the fact that a slight improvement in graphics costs twice as much, I think most people would agree that AAA games are overpriced. But even with such high and unjustified prices, they still have the nerve to shove in microtransactions. For many games, it seems that gameplay has taken a back seat to loot boxes and battle passes. EA is known for its sports games such as FIFA and Madden, where new versions use the same gameplay and sometimes even contain bugs from games released years ago. In such cases, you pay not only for a low quality game, but also for microtransactions to get at least some normal gaming experience. Unfortunately, for companies such as EA and Blizzard, this is a really successful strategy because it leads to higher profits and a revenue stream that offers better long-term prospects. Because of this, the trend is not likely to stop anytime soon, making AAA games a less promising proposition for gamers today. But when you pay for a game and shell out $60 or more, you usually expect to get a finished game. However, this is not always the case. I don't need to explain to you right now how terrible the state of games has been in the recent years. It's becoming more and more common for a game to be released and then improved over the years. This gives companies two advantages. First, the ability to release a part of the game and then add the rest over time, as well as to receive recurring revenue from gamers in the form of add-ons and other items that can be purchased. Secondly, publishers believe that any problems found during the launch can be immediately fixed later with patches. This means that the first players actually act as testers of the game and do some of the work that the developers should have done for them. From a business perspective, I find this extremely insightful and pragmatic. From a gamer's point of view, I would consider it a ripoff if I bought an unfinished game and was used as free labor. So, of course, after this attitude towards the audience, many gamers are increasingly focusing their attention on independent developers and small studios. There are many games that I find much more enjoyable than many of the AAA games I've played. Undertale, which you most likely haven't heard of, is a prime example of a game that subverts RPG tropes. Signalis, which I recently played, manages to recreate the creepiness of Silent Hill 2 while doing its own unique thing. But what do all these games have in common that I think is missing from big budget games? The answer is that these games have a voice. While a AAA game has a lot of developers, designers, and performers, it can often turn into a messy mess with too many cooks. Indie games don't suffer from this, and as a result, they don't have an identity crisis, and they usually have a clear game cycle that has been well tested on a fundamental level. So the AAA industry continues to fall, desperately grasping at the few handles they can grab to slow the fall. Fortunately, for many large companies in this business, it is already too late. While these companies are trying to put on a strong face among the opposition they face, people like me, who know full well how long they have been scraping the bottom of the barrel, know how close their end is. These companies are lying and cheating their customers in a desperate attempt to milk them for as much money as possible to save themselves and satisfy their investors. They have begun to see that the bottomless well of money they once drew from does in fact have a bottom, and that it is much shallower than they expected. Like a cornered animal, the AAA industry has tried to capitalize on the social justice movement led by politically correct people. Of course, this has failed spectacularly, sliding them even further down the slope of ruin. It has damaged their reputation beyond repair.